The history of American football dates back to the initial versions of rugby. Both sports have their origins in variations of soccer that were played in Great Britain in the mid-19th century. In these versions of soccer, the ball was kicked toward a goalpost or run across the line. American football is the result of several important divergences of the football and rugby associations, especially the rule changes instituted by Walter Camp, a Yale University graduate considered the father of American football. Among the important changes are the introduction of down rules and the line of scrimmage in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the evolution of the game by college coaches such as Eddie Cochems, famous Alonzo Stagg, Knute Rockne, and Glenn Pop Warner helped take advantage of the recent introduction of the forward pass. The popularity of college football grew, as it became the dominant version of the sport in the United States during the first half of the 20th century. Super Bowl games, a tradition of college football, attracted a national audience of teams' university students. Fueled by fierce rivalries, college football is still a major attraction in the United States. The origin of professional football dates back to 1882, with William Pudge Heffelfinger's $1 million contract to play the game for the Allegheny Athletic Association against the Pittsburgh Athletic Club. In 1920, the American Professional Football Association was formed. This league changed its name to the National Football League (NFL) 2 years later, and eventually became the major American Football League. Primarily a sport of the industrial cities of the Midwestern United States, professional football eventually became the national phenomenon. Football's growing popularity dates back to the 1958 NFL Championship, a game that has been named the best game played. A rival league to the NFL, the American Football League (AFL) began play in 1960. The pressure it put on the top league led to a merger between the two leagues and the creation of the Super Bowl, which has become the most watched television event annually in the United States. Although there are mentions of Native Americans playing games, modern American football has its origins in traditional ball games played in villages and schools in Europe for many centuries before America was colonized by Europeans. There are reports of early settlers in Jamestown, Virginia playing games with inflated balls in the early 17th century. The early games appear to have had much in common with the traditional carnival football played in England, especially on the holiday called Shrove Tuesday, where a lemon was used instead of a ball. The games remained very disorganized until the 19th century, when intramural games began to be played on various university campuses. Each school played its own variation of the game. Students at Princeton University played a game called Clown since 1820. In 1827, a Harvard tradition known as Bloody Monday began. This consisted of a massive ball game between the first and second years. In 1860, both the city police and the university authorities agreed that Bloody Monday had to stop. Harvard students responded by mourning a simulated figure called Fightin' Football, for which they held different funerals. The authorities were at command, and it was a dozen years before football could be played again at Harvard. Dartmouth played its own version called Old Division Football, the rules for which were first published in 1871, although the game dates back to at least the 1830s. All of these games, and others, share certain common traits. Remained largely mafia-style games, with large numbers of players attempting to cross the ball within an area, often by any means necessary. The rules were simple, violence and injuries were common. Following the enormous success of the 1958 National Football League Championship game, college football no longer enjoyed the same popularity as the NFL, at least on a national level. While both leagues benefited from the arrival of television, since the late 1950s the NFL has become a popular national sport, while college football has maintained strong regional ties. Both professional and college football became the national television phenomenon. In the 1950s, Notre Dame, which had a large national following, formed its own network to broadcast its games, but the sport generally still retained a largely regional audience. In 1952, the NCAA signed away all television broadcast rights to its member institutions' games. This situation continued until 1984, when several schools brought a lawsuit under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The Supreme Court ruled against the NCAA, and today's schools are free to negotiate their own television deals. ABC Sports began broadcasting an official game of the week in 1966, bringing national audiences the major matches and rivalries.